Hey guys, Dean of DVD here to talk about cinema, films. In particular, there's a group that got together and apparently wanted to talk about what film first got them excited about or interested them or grabbed their attention as far as cinematography is concerned. Now, if you ask the average film goer what is cinematography, they'll probably be pretty close. Uh, what is cinematography? Well, it's the angle of the shot, it's the lighting used, it's the film stock they chose, it's partly the director who chose what should appear on it, but it's also any tints or filters on the film, any the lighting choices again, what type of light was chosen. It's not just sunlight. What kind of light was chosen to light the scene? What colors were used in the scene, and how are those mostly enhanced or shown to their true perfection? It's all that. Um, it's also special effects, the like I said, lenses and filters. I mentioned. I'm gonna make sure I don't leave anything out. General composition of the scene. So the director's partly involved with that, but it's everything to do with how that picture is going to look on the screen when it's done. So the question then is, what film first got my attention when it comes to cinematography? What one jumped out at me and said, "Wow!" And as I get older and I look at this film, I still see genius in it, in how it was lit. I read up on how it was lit. Well, first of all, it's a Technicolor film, and Technicolor, the process of Technicolor, I think it's important to talk about that first before I get into the film itself. So Technicolor was a film process invented by a bunch of people. Cost millions of dollars. I think about 8 years to develop this. The first film, I believe, was in the 20s or early 30s. So by the time this film rolled around, close to 1940, and there's a hint for you. When it rolled around close to 1940, Technicolor was pretty well widely used. It was widely used until about 1975 in the United States, when Eastman Kodak's film process kind of took over. But the nice thing about Technicolor is that as expensive as a technique as it is to use, and as cumbersome as it is the only film process that I know of where the original image doesn't fade. So when you have the master, speaking of it in recording terms, when you get the master print, it doesn't fade. Now, every bit of Technicolor equipment in the world has been destroyed, dismantled. It was viewed as being an obsolete process because it had to have a 35 millimeter, pretty thick metal. It layered three dyes over the film. But in order to do that, you had to have this metal piece with holes in it. You've probably seen it before. It's sort of like what film looks like now. This was metal, and they'd have to run this metal piece through. It was 240 feet long or something. And when they wanted to add the dyes to it, they'd have to take the film and layer it on top that was going to be transferred to. And then these dyes would be added one at a time. I can't remember what the three colors are anymore. Um, but anyway, these three colors would be layered on top of each other. By doing that, you produce every color. Um, but this film had to go through holes in the walls and the floor and the ceiling, and run all over the place. While being a hard piece. And then eventually these holes were used to basically put that film right in place, tight against it, and then pull both through the process. And I'm not even explaining it very well, I don't think, but the dyes were then added as it was pulled through toward the end, and all three dyes were then, and the finished product came out. But the colors are beautiful. When you see a Technicolor film, this is a good example of one I'm going to talk about. The colors jump off the screen, and they're very bright, vibrant. They tended to fade a little bit, though, and because of that, a black and white image was added of the film, of the images shot, and then that was put in there too to add the details that were partially lost with the Technicolor process. But when it's done right, and it was done right in this movie, it's just brilliant to look at. Now you can talk about a lot of movies that were done in Technicolor, and a lot of movies that were very vibrant um, and very beautiful films. But this one was one of the first ones I saw where I said, "Wow!" And to this day, I still say, "Wow!" It's got some special effects in it too. And by now, you may have guessed what it might be. You probably narrowed it down to a couple, but it is The Wizard of Oz. Just a beautiful, beautiful film. This is a DVD 70th anniversary film. I never found a reason to replace it. I do have a Blu-ray of it someplace because I picked it up for like $10. But this one is the one I watched when I'm going to watch one. And the image is fine. And it mirrors what I saw when I was a kid. Oh, that's the other thing about Technicolor. It can, when you watch a Technicolor film, um, it would be as if you were in the theater. That's the images that were seen then. Some of these other films that were not in Technicolor that have been redone, it's not exactly what would have been seen in the theater during the time it was shown. And of course, you can no longer get a master of. If the master hasn't been saved and for some reason it's gone, you can't create it again because Technicolor is no longer around. So you can do something maybe, but you can't make it Technicolor anymore. Anyway, The Wizard of Oz. So why is this such a great why is the cinematography so great? Why is it such a beautiful cinematic production? Well, let's talk about some of the scenes that are in the Wizard of Oz. Early on in the film, they took the images and they put a sepia filter on it. So sepia filter makes everything look older than it is, right? It's not black and white, but it's taken from a black and white film process. But then the sepia images are laid over it, and sepia. There's sepia right here. There's a sepia picture right there, right? Judy Garland up against the haystack. It's got this almost brownish look as opposed to black and white, which in some might help the gingham dress that she's got on. It might help the straw here. And the sky looks a little different than it would be black and white. Skin tone will look a little bit different in sepia, but it looks older, right? Same thing over here. We've got this image over here as she's walking around with Toto. And one more with the traveler here, the showman here, who eventually will be the Wizard of Oz, right? So those moments in sepia are really cool. But then, so the house goes up in a tornado, right? And we see the house spinning, special effects. When it lands finally with a thud and everything kind of jumps up in the room and goes back down, and she opens that door, and all of a sudden the sepia world is a brilliant color world. And what a great cinematography moment that was, or moment in cinema. I would imagine that back in 1939 or 40, whenever this film was seen in a movie theater, people might have gasped when that happened. You might have heard an audible gasp from the audience, and probably some murmuring, because it hadn't been done before. At least I haven't seen a film that did that before, where it started out as a black and white, and then boom, just like that door opening, and all of a sudden the world is magical in a lot of ways. And then everything became magical, didn't it? What was kind of a scary moment became sort of a magical moment with the Munchkins and the yellow brick road and all the lollipop twins and everything that's there, the flowers and everything else that's there when you first see the Land of Oz. And then we're introduced to two characters that are very different, right? And the color on these two was the way the lighting was done was pretty cool. So you've got Glenda the Good Witch, and then you've got Margaret Hamilton here playing the Wicked Witch of the West, whose sister is killed right early on. But look at the lighting, the bright lighting here on her, and then things are shiny and beautiful, and here everything's dark. She's dressed in dark clothing. There's nothing to use to highlight her face, though it had to be lit a certain way so you could see it as well as you could without having it shimmer like this. So lighting, angles, big time in the Wizard of Oz. Um, and then you know what else? For me, I think of when I think of cinematography, I think of things like Apocalypse Now, Blade Runner, maybe The Godfather. I think of Lawrence of Arabia, one of my favorite films. And certainly that had great cinematography, but it wasn't the first. It wasn't the first time. This one was. But yet, none of those are vastly better than, or even maybe any better than, The Wizard of Oz. And one of the scenes that convinced me that the cinematography was, just amazing is does it create an image that is lasting? Does the image last in your mind? And if you think about The Wizard of Oz, is there one image that lasts in your mind more than any other image? Maybe for me there is. Maybe there are a few, but this one right here jumps out at me. The cover of an Electric Light Orchestra album later on, but yeah, that one where Dorothy is basically saying, "Take them then, take my shoes." I'm supposedly going to give the witch power, and she can't. She can't do it because Dorothy's still alive, right? But that spark that comes off of her fingers and as she screams, pretty cool cinematography there. Simple, yeah, but very, very effective. The flying monkeys, very effective, and the dark scenes in the woods as compared to the scene in Munchkin Land. There's everything's bright. The temperatures had to be over 100 degrees to get that lighting right, to have all those colors pop the way they did on the flowers and the lollipops and all the garb that the Munchkins had on, and Glenda's outfit and so on, and of course the fire from the witch. Great special effects there as well. Just a wonderfully cinematic movie. The visuals in The Wizard of Oz are amazing. The songs and the angles for the songs, or the way that the various characters did their dancing routine, whether it be the Scarecrow, who wished he had a brain, or the Tin Man, who wished he had a heart. The melody may stay the same, but the dance is totally different, and the song is totally different with each one. And then, of course, we get to Emerald City, and everything is the giant Emerald Castle, and then to see the Wizard of Oz in person with the flames on either side and the booming voice, and to find out it's all just a man behind a curtain, right? And that is even very, very, very cinematic, but also very telling, I guess. The whole guy behind the curtain. And of course, only Toto could spot him. Nobody else could spot him as the faker that maybe he was, or maybe he wasn't. But in the end, what's a dream? And now we're back to the sepia world. Everything was a dream, but we're back to the sepia world again. And somehow that world, maybe not as colorful, maybe not as vibrant, not filled with nearly as interesting, well, not filled with quite as interesting characters, and yet when you think about it, each one of the characters were still there, and others. And maybe, just maybe, Mrs. Gulch won't be quite as scary anymore. Um, so, great movie, great cinematography. The Technicolor process really never done any better, I don't think, than The Wizard of Oz. It's the kind of movie Technicolor was invented for. Those bright colors, the angles that they had to shoot various scenes in. The darkness of the woods compared to Emerald City or Munchkin Land. And each area was just its own, due to the lighting, to the angles, to the colors, and each one was different. The poppy field, everything's just a little bit different, and not just a little bit different, a lot different. And each one of those areas then was made its own by the cinematography. So that's my bet for cinematography. Wizard of Oz, 1939. Victor Fleming directed. He also directed another film that year, Gone with the Wind, which is another great cinematography film. But that's it. The Wizard of Oz. That's my bet for cinematography, at least the one I first remember. And really, I can't think of a better one than that. That's it, guys. Dean of DVD. Hope to hit you up with another one of these things, hopefully soon. Take care.